What I'd like to talk about today is faith and doubt. Yeah. So most of you have heard that the three pillars of our Zen practice are faith, doubt, and determination. Those three. I want to focus on faith and doubt in this talk. It's come up in some people's inquiries, and some of you have done the Zen Foundations class, and we had a whole class that went deeply into faith and doubt. So I'd like to appreciate these aspects of our practice. They've been really helpful to me as I've had questions about perhaps the quality of my practice, or how to tune it if I feel like it's off in a certain way. To use this kind of template of faith, doubt, and determination to see where perhaps I'm lacking, where I'm out of balance, you could say. So to understand that these qualities are kind of like the three legs of a stool. It's you need three, right? One's not good, two's not good, three, boom, there you go. You got the three. And it's exactly like that, these three qualities that give the firm foundation for your practice. And then with those, you can really advance. Okay, but if one leg is shorter than the other, not so much, right? One leg is really shorter, keels over, and practice goes awry. Okay. So it's important to keep them in some level of alignment, with each other. And we have to know kind of what they are, what these sort of qualities of mind are in order to do that. So I hope to bring out something of the quality of faith and doubt so you can use that to tune your practice. So I want to start with a self-assessment. Okay, I'm going to start with faith. Faith, as we understand it, it's a twofold faith. This comes from Dogen. So a twofold faith. It's faith that sitting zazen is itself the actualization of the inherently enlightened Bodhi mind. Okay. So faith that you are the Buddha. Your life is the life of the Buddha. And the second part, it's faith that sitting zazen will one day culminate in the sudden and direct perception of this mind, what we call enlightenment. Okay? So the faith that you fundamentally are awake, and the faith that by practicing zazen, you will progressively actualize that nature. Right? You see the difference in those two? There's a slight difference in those two. Okay, so here's the self-assessment. On a scale of 1 to 100, how much faith do you have in each of these? Okay. And just do your best, give it a number between 0 and 100 on how much faith you feel you might have in these. I asked, or I should say, one of my Naropa students in the Zen class, came to me once and said, I am the Buddha. I said, oh, really? Yeah. Do you really believe that? I looked him in the eye, and he kind of backed up. He went, no. So I know you'll all be authentic if you could give it a number. Okay, so we're going to start with faith that practice is itself the actualization of the inherently enlightened Bodhi-mind. So you are a Buddha. Anybody at 100? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Huh?
I actually did rate that at 100.
You did?
Whether I'm lying to myself, I don't know. But
okay.
It's kind of the same
No doubt.
thing.
No doubt at all. You are awakened.
I was hesitant I looked around to see if anyone else did that. And I was like, oh,
Well, that's gutsy, Joel. I appreciate that. You jumped in. Yeah. Okay. Anybody between 75 and 100? Yeah. Okay. Is that a hand raise, Gyodo? You went for a head scratch afterwards.
That's a hand raise.
Okay. Yeah. And then online, can you see? I see a few there. Okay. How about between 25 and 75? All right. Okay. And then anybody between 0 and 25? I think I saw everybody's hands. Okay. All right. Very good. So now let's do the faith that sitting zazen will one day culminate in the sudden and direct perception of this mind, so that you will actualize it at some point. So anybody at 100% with this one? Okay.
I feel confused about the idea of it being in the future.
Yeah, well, that's what it is. It's about being in the future. So it's a faith that this will happen. Yeah.
In the future that will come? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. That you will actualize it in your life.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
In that sense, yes.
Okay. So anybody at 100? We had a few at 100. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Kind of a pretty solid 100. It's like, yeah, I'm going to go for it. Okay, good. How about between 75 and 100? Okay, yeah, I see 3 online. Okay, how about between 25 and 75? Okay, and then I think we covered everyone, but was there anybody under 25? Okay, enjoy. Okay, so, and Alona also under 25. Okay, so it's interesting. So some of you have a higher actual faith in your fundamental Buddha nature than you do in that you will actualize that Buddha nature. Okay, interesting. Good. So it's a good reflection. It's a good reflection. When Soen Nakagawa was asked, how much faith is enough, by someone who clearly felt he didn't have enough faith, he answered, "Oh, yeah, don't worry. 3% faith is enough. 3%, that's enough." So let's appreciate this mind of faith, so we can appreciate the fact that 3% is enough. Everybody here has enough. The Zen master Hongzhi, in the 11th century, is the author of the Book of Equanimity. He has these wonderful expressions of practice and of the awakened mind. He says, the field of boundless emptiness is what exists from the very beginning. You must purify, cure, grind down, or brush away all the tendencies you have fabricated into apparent habits. Then you can reside in the clear circle of brightness. Utter emptiness has no image. Upright independence does not rely on anything. Just expand and illuminate the original truth, unconcerned by external conditions. Accordingly, we are told to realize that not a single thing exists. So, an interesting expression, most of this is an expression of faith, you could say, the openness. This is what we are. So abide in the brightness. Nothing exists, just expand and illuminate the original truth, which is already here. But there's also more than that. His first 2 sentences, the field of boundless emptiness is what exists from the very beginning. You must purify cure, grind down, and brush away all the tendencies you have fabricated into apparent habits. All right. So right from the beginning, there's something we need to do with our inherent karmic conditioning in order to realize that which we intrinsically are. That's the doubt part. Suzuki Roshi says, you are perfect and complete as you are, and you could use a little improvement. Perfect and complete as you are, that's faith. You can use a little improvement. Okay, where? This is the doubt. That's the questioning. Where can I use improvement? How can I improve? Who needs to improve? All of those key questions. Doubt maybe is better phrased questioning. But doubt is good too. Doubt isn't self-doubt. Right? That's why doubt can sometimes, if we take it as self-doubt, I'm not good enough. Who am I to think I might be the Buddha? This practice surely doesn't work. These kinds of more critical beliefs, they're not really questions, they're more beliefs. That's not the doubt we're talking about. That's not the great doubt. The great doubt is that question that comes from deep within your soul around what is your true nature. Who am I? Who is awake? So you could say this understanding that you really are perfect and complete just as you are. That's what that first one is. You're just perfectly complete, perfectly whole just as you are. You could say it isn't the limited personality that you identify with that is sitting. It's actually the Buddha that's sitting. It's the awakened one. As you. So when a thought arises, it isn't Robert that thinks, it's the Buddha that thinks. When you see a sight, it isn't Graham that sees the sight, it's Buddha that sees the sight. And Buddha feels, Buddha hears. Buddha just means awakened one. So the awakened one hears right now. The awakened one sees. And so awakeness is always present. Didn't begin anywhere, doesn't end anywhere. Ever present. And we return again and again to the experience of this awakeness. And we fully internalize our identification as that awakeness. And then you know it to be true. You just know it in your bones. So this requires a practice of absorption, a deep absorption in your experience. When you're separate from the experience, if there's that distance between the one who is experiencing and the thing that's being experienced. And that self-illumination is somewhat obscured. In Appreciate Your Life, Maezumi Roshi says, in the midst of joy and pain, there is no joy and there is no pain. In the midst of thinking, there is no thinking. In the midst of the self, there is no self. This is the fundamental wisdom of zazen. So we can experience this. We experience this in our zazen. So to experience that absorption, where the joy and pain disappear as such, as experiences, yet they're happening, just not as experiences. The tremor in the heart is happening, the feelings in the body are happening. But in a way, we say there's no pain or there's no joy because they're empty. They're empty of a separate existence. And faith is the experience of this awakeness. If we even have a small glimpse of this, then we can't deny it. And we've all had glimpses. We can no longer deny that we're not who we think we are. I guess I'd put it that way. That we're not separate. When we've had a glimpse of what Dogen says, the myriad things experiencing themselves through the self or as the self. We could probably do a whole lot to forget it. But if we practice, we can't forget that. We know somewhere down inside we've had a glimpse of our true nature. So that's why 3% is enough, is that you in some ways you can't go back, it only goes in one direction. Especially if you commit yourself to practice. If you commit yourself to practice, it's accelerated. If you don't commit yourself to practice, it's very slow, long, and it involves a lot of suffering along the path. So this faith isn't, we don't come to this place where it's necessarily super comfortable and everything is hunky-dory and we're blissful all the time. Or that we're in this place of, the presence of God all the time. I've been moved by the latter accounts of Mother Teresa. I know some of you probably are aware of, I think it was a few years after her death that some of her memoirs or her confessional letters were actually made public. And in those letters, it was revealed that she was didn't have the contact with God that she had earlier in her life that set her off on her ministry, and she hadn't had it for decades. And so she was actually what she called in a deep spiritual darkness for most of her ministry, for most of her life. Apparently, there was only one time from the time she was, I'm not sure how old she was, but I think it was 1949 is when she had her initial sort of encounters with God. And then she had one more encounter up until the time she died, which I think was in the 70s or maybe the 80s. So for decades. And all through that time, she was beseeching God to not abandon her, to speak with her the way she was spoken to let her know that she was still held in God, still recognized by God, was still one in Christ. So her faith was sorely tested. Now, a lot of people, when those things came out, they said, well, she was a fraud because she was representing herself as being, I don't think she ever called herself a saint. In fact, I'm quite sure she never called herself a saint, but she was representing herself somehow as a saint or someone with some special access to God. And she really didn't. And I think that's absurd. She had incredible faith, and she never lost that faith. But it had to include this experience of not being directly spoken to, of not having the direct presence. So she said something towards the end of her life, and this might actually have been one of the letters. She said, we must know exactly when we say yes to God, what it is in that yes. Yes means I surrender, totally, fully, without any counting the cost. So it meant accepting whatever God gave and giving whatever God chose to take away, which in her case was, a certain experience of, say, divinity. But she accepted that. She never lost her faith. She kept doing her work without a clear knowing from her God that this is the work you should be doing. So faith requires this surrender, the surrender of our ideas about how things need to be. Surrendering our preferences, surrendering our ideas about how things are. It's not contingent, right? You can say, well, if this happens, then then my faith is really validated. Now your faith will be validated in your practice, but it might not look the way you want it to look. We all want these big enlightenment experiences and have these breakthroughs, right? But they're actually relatively uncommon to have experiences like that. Will your faith diminish if it doesn't appear that way? No, if you orient yourself to your practice, right, your faith can actually increase when things don't go the way you want them to or think they're supposed to, and yet still you continue to grow in spirit. So that, I think, is the experience of Mother Teresa. It didn't go the way she wanted. She didn't get what she wanted, but somehow that actually was a deepening of her faith, a deepening of her own, I would say, Buddha nature, her awakened nature. I have voices in my head that are very not full of faith. They will come in and be very self-centered and try to convince me that that's who I am, that I'm limited to that. And I can lose it for a bit. So I have to reestablish some distance from it and just say, oh, that's that voice. That's that voice. That's questioning, that's limited, that is very concerned with how things are going to work out for the self. And it's important to just recognize that that voice is coming from a place of insecurity and fear. It's a fear voice. And to reinforce the inner voice that says, you are loved, you are held, you are one. You are taken care of because we are. This quality of mind and faith, we're sitting in the condition of openness. This is from Maezumi Roshi. Sitting, Shikantaza, specifically what he's talking about. We're sitting in the condition of openness. You are nothing other than all space and all time. How does openness feel in your body? We can feel that, we can touch that. We can feel what it means to be closed, what it means to be contracted. The body gets tight. Feelings are suppressed. Stimulation can be resisted or closed down. Sensory experience. Now, how about openness? Open to feeling. Feelings move through our body. Sensation comes in more strongly. Information comes in more strongly. Sitting in this condition of openness. This openness can actually be disorienting, right? It can be scary, actually. It can be disorienting. The mind wants to do things and fix things and change things and organize things. But the condition of openness doesn't need all of that. Those really serve to kind of close us down, get in the way of our experience of openness. So we have to step again and again into openness because we have a tendency to sit. I'll say a little bit about doubt now, but I've been going on for a little while, so I won't go on as much about doubt. But our path of practicing doubt is koan practice, so we question, bring these questions up. So Hakuin says, at the bottom of great doubt lies great awakening. If you doubt fully, you will awaken fully. If you doubt fully, you will awaken fully. The path of doubt is to inquire so deeply into whatever it is you're inquiring deeply into. The core question being, who am I? So really studying the self, inquiring deeply into the self. So fully that the question itself dissolves. In the same way that shikantaza is being so absorbed in joy and pain that the joy and pain and the self disappear. This is also being so absorbed in the question that the question disappears. So they do go hand in hand. The more faith you bring to your life, the more questions come up. Right? Well, if God is all present and ever present, then why is this war going on in Gaza? Right? The more faith, the bigger, the deeper the questions. And then you address that question, and something comes to you from a deep penetration of that question. That ends up increasing your faith. The more questions come up, the more you realize that you can't intellectually solve them all, that more surrender is called for. You're not going to answer the question, why is that war going on in Gaza, satisfactorily from a limited understanding. You really have to penetrate deep. I don't have the answer to that question, but I know that if you address that question at the deepest level, you will have to surrender your ideas about how the world is. And then something new and something fuller from not knowing will arise that will be a more satisfactory answer to that question for you, a more heartful and holistic answer to that. And that's going to come from a bigger dimension of your own being, not from your limited identification with your small self. Mumonkan case 46. Sekiso Osho asked, how can you proceed on further from the top of the 100-foot pole? Proceed from the top of the pole, and you'll show your whole body in the 10 directions. So, starts with a question. How can you proceed from whatever pole you're on? That's doubt. Step forward, and you will show your whole body in the 10 directions. That is the state of openness. That's the faith. Okay, so nice qualities of practice is to keep strengthening all. The third one, of course, is determination. So we need that third leg, which is that just keep going. Just keep going with our practice. Okay. That one's easier to understand. Okay, well, thank you for your attention.